working on the patch panel here for, how do I want to say it, the right side rear quarter panel. This is the wheel. Let me set that down. The wheel goes in here. This is the lower front part, right rear quarter panel, and you can see it's kind of, I don't know what that is, pie-shaped almost, but with a curve, and we've got a flange on it. If you take a flat piece of metal and put this kind of a flange on it, it will bend back toward you. So I've taken great pains to shrink the edge down here so that not only does it sit flat, but it starts to push down on the left side of this, what we're looking at. So here's the original piece here, and you can see the shape of that, and it's nice and even. This one, not so even. I've got a big buckle on this side, and it's just a little bit more curved than flat, but not much. So I'm going to wind up having to cut pie-shaped sections out of here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just cut in here with my snips, just make a couple small deals, weld it back together. You'll never see it from the outside, but it needs to happen. The other thing I'll do is, before I actually make those relief cuts, is I'll cut this down to size. You can see I'm about an inch oversized, and when I do that, it'll relieve some of that, make it a little easier to bend, but I could spend another hour trying to shrink this, or I could spend about 2 minutes cutting it and welding it. Here are the cuts that I made. So you can see I just made 4 little cuts, and once you make those cuts, I'm going to try and do this one-handed. You can see how easily that gets bent, and what I'll do is form it, there we go, form it up to the curve that matches our existing piece here. So hopefully we'll match that curve up, trim the piece down, weld the sides. So I'll just have to, kind of squeeze those together, weld them, grind them down. You'll never know. Here we go after all the pie-shaped pieces have been cut out of there. God, that looks horrible. You can't hardly focus on it. But you can see there's, or maybe you can't see, there's 4 relief cuts. We got a pretty major amount of contour in this panel. The piece that we have here lost a lot of its contour when I held it up to the car. This is what it wanted to be. So quite a bit was taken out on some of these pie-shaped pieces to get them to fit. So I'm set up with my welder, just going to tack these in real quickly. You want to tack them in one after another, because if you weld up an entire seam, it's going to heat this up and the panel is going to lose its contour. So first things first, I'll probably get a piece of metal, maybe even this thing, and put it behind here when I weld to absorb some of the heat. Otherwise I'll wind up cutting more pie-shaped pieces and reshaping this thing, and I've spent too much time on it already, so that's what we're going to do. There we are, tacked up. You can see our panel held its contour, so we'll just finish weld these up and then grind them down. Panel should be ready to install. Here's the final stage before we put it on the car. I ground off all the rust and cleaned up the edges. You can still see a couple little dings here. We also cleaned up the backside where the rust is pretty bad as well. So easier to do that now while it's off the car than on. We'll get this marked out and scribed, then we'll weld it on. I'm going to try and do this one-handed. Here's our piece. You can see we trimmed up the edges and scribed them, and I can't get it to fit in there real great one-handed, but as I push this thing on, you can see the contour of this panel here is a little bit flat compared to the contour of our last patch. There we go. And as I weld it, I will curve this one a little bit more. I still have access to the inside through this hole back here. So I'll be using leverage and whatever else to shape this guy to our piece on the end here. Here's our last little panel tacked in. I ground down the welds over here a little bit just so I could hammer on the metal and really see where I'm at. I've got a little bit of a spot here that I need to work from the inside and outside, and this all looks like it's going to contour out pretty well. So I'll do the finish welding here and we'll be done with this piece. And here's our piece finish welded in, and I think we're done welding hopefully on this lower rear right quarter panel, and we can move back up to our problems back here with the hoods and the gaps and the apron and the engine bay.